The story begins with a boy who harbored a burning passion for the mystical. In a modern world brimming with technology, he detested reality and always longed for the existence of magic. Though reason told him that the stage magic was merely tricks, and that his father, a man obsessed with dark arts, was nothing but a failure, deep in his heart, he still held on to hope. Destiny struck. When he was 17, one day, upon seeing a girl almost hit by a truck, his body automatically lunged forward. A powerful impact, darkness enveloped him, and he wondered if this was the end. But no, when he opened his eyes, he didn't see a hospital ceiling, but a room with unfamiliar architecture. He was even more shocked to realize he couldn't move, and before him were two giants looking down tenderly. It turned out he had been reborn, but in the form of a newborn baby. 2 years passed, and the boy was now named Abel Belek, living with the Marin clan, a reclusive tribe with white hair and red eyes. Abel soon displayed exceptional intelligence, already feeding himself at 2 years old. But what excited him most was the moment he saw his mother cut her hand, and his father used magic to heal it. In that instant, Abel's worldview exploded. Magic was real. His lifelong dream from his previous life had come true. Instead of playing like other children, Abel threw himself into research. He discovered the Marin clan's secret lay in totems, wooden effigies containing spirits. Abel began his days as an eccentric. At just 4 years old, he wielded a carving knife, creating piles of totems that drove his father mad because there was no more room in the house. Neighbors began calling him the totem fanatic, but Abel ignored it all. He and his younger sister Giselle secretly practiced. They discovered how to write light characters to control magic without lengthy incantations. At 7 years old, Abel and Giselle sought out the old clan chief, considered the village sage, to ask to become his apprentices. Initially, the old man appeared strict and skeptical, but upon witnessing Abel skillfully control two totems simultaneously, making them fly and spin, he was completely shocked. Abel's power increased absurdly. During one training session, he accidentally created a wind sphere with terrifying destructive power, blowing everything away and almost giving the old master a heart attack. Furthermore, his totems were intelligent enough to automatically cancel attacks when sensing danger, a technique even the clan chief had never witnessed. Not long after, the old clan chief burst into tears, declaring that Abel had learned everything he could teach. He became the first to graduate from his training. But for someone obsessed with magic like Abel, that wasn't enough. He rushed into the village library declaring he wanted to borrow all the books for research, making the old librarian almost faint. Abel's room turned into a mountain of books, and the boy immersed himself in them, researching day and night until he fell ill. Time flew by, and Abel was now 13 years old. He created a special magical device based on knowledge from his previous life, a status board in the style of an RPG game to measure power stats. When he tested it on his sister Giselle, the machine reported her magic, Mage stat, as 37 and physical strength, STR, as 8. Abel confidently checked his own stats, convinced he would be incredibly powerful. And he truly was powerful. His magic stat reached 865, a monstrous number compared to an average person's mere 20. However, when he looked at the physical strength line, the number displayed was 2. Abel was stunned. He possessed immense mana, but his physical health was worse than a 3-year-old's, 4 times weaker than his sister. Unwilling to accept being a paper mage, and under pressure to become the clan's successor, Abel decided he had to go hunting to train his physique. Despite his family trying to stop him and his neighbors being suspicious because he had never set foot outside the house, Abel resolutely signed up to join the hunting party. At the gathering point, he met other children from the village like Galia and Shibi. Despite being considered a weakling, Abel remained optimistic. He knew that with his vast knowledge of magic and self-made totems, he wouldn't be a burden. The story temporarily concluded with Abel stepping into the forest, leaving behind his younger sister Giselle sobbing with worry, and a promise to return soon. The journey of the genius mage with a strength stat of 2 officially began. The hunting trip did not start smoothly. While the other children quickly made friends and integrated, Abel was lost in the thoughts of a solitary person. He realized that no matter the world, his introverted nature always set him apart from the crowd. To make matters worse, the instructor imposed a harsh rule: absolutely no use of magic. He wanted Abel to train with a bow and arrow and physical strength, the very things he lacked most. And sure enough, after only an hour of walking, the youth with a strength stat of 2 was out of breath, his limbs trembling, wanting to go home, earning him exasperated looks from his teammates. However, a mage's instinct is not easily suppressed. When a rare bird flew by, Abel completely forgot the instructions, secretly using magic to catch it, running and grinning as if he'd found gold, ignoring his body screaming in exhaustion. When discovered, Abel innocently explained that using the sleep spell was far more effective than archery, deeply shocking the instructor, also a seasoned hunter, with the boy's ability to cast spells without tools. But the fun didn't last long. The ground began to shake violently. The most experienced hunters immediately realized that these footsteps were not an earthquake, but the sign of a harbinger of doom approaching. From the shadows, a greater bear appeared. Its size and menacing aura made the entire hunting party, including the adult men, freeze in horror. In this dire predicament, Abel was forced to act. He unleashed his strongest sleep magic, combined with a wind blade to pierce through the monster's thick fur, successfully taking down the giant beast to everyone's astonishment. But the true tragedy only struck now. During the earlier chaos, Abel's father had rushed out to take the blow to protect everyone. When the dust settled, Abel was stunned to see his father lying collapsed under the debris, his breath faint. The wound was too severe. His abdomen had a large perforation. The father, knowing he wouldn't make it, used his remaining strength to utter his last words, entrusting his family and his younger sister Giselle to Abel. A mournful atmosphere enveloped the entire forest. But Abel refused to accept this fate. He was a reincarnated genius. He wouldn't let his father die so meaninglessly. A crazy and forbidden idea flashed in his mind: biomagic, flesh grafting. Without hesitation, Abel rushed to the corpse of the greater bear he had just defeated. He used a knife to carve out the freshest chunks of the monster's flesh, his eyes radiating a terrifying focus that made those around him shudder. Using his adaptation skill, Abel began performing the most insane surgery in history, grafting monster flesh onto human wounds. Essentially, he was turning his father into a semi-chimera to sustain his life. Though sweat poured like rain and pressure weighed heavily on his shoulders, Abel gritted his teeth and carried it through. He knew this was forbidden and risky magic, but it was the only way to save his dying father. The surgery was miraculously successful. To transport the injured back to the village, Abel once again used his intelligence, fashioning wooden totems into stretchers and mobilizing his friends' help. On the way back, a comical incident occurred. Rius, the blonde-haired friend accompanying the group, suddenly became shy and inquired about the relationship between Abel and Giselle. It turned out he thought Abel was Giselle's boyfriend and thus considered Abel a love rival. When he learned that Abel was actually the older brother of his crush, Rius's attitude did a 180-degree turn. From hostile to flattering, he almost blurted out calling Abel brother-in-law, which gave Abel goosebumps and made him reject the idea immediately. The group returned safely to the village that night. Giselle sobbed and rushed to embrace Abel. The emotional reunion concluded a tumultuous hunt that also brought significant turning points for Abel. Time flew by. 2 years have passed since the bear incident. Abel is now 15, more grown up, but his passion for magic research burns as brightly as ever. He created a giant arm-shaped totem named Sir Mountain, just to cultivate incense leaves. The purpose was to prepare for the upcoming coming-of-age ceremony, where the village youth must consume these leaves. However, Abel's peaceful life was disrupted by the arrival of Noswell Carlco, the heir of the Carlco family, who monopolized the leaf trade in the region. He appeared arrogant and overbearing, intending to intimidate anyone daring to cultivate illicit leaves. However, this pampered young man possessed an extremely extra personality. The moment he saw the beautiful Giselle, he completely forgot his initial purpose and immediately rushed to propose, much to the chagrin of Rius, the almost groom. But the biggest surprise came when Noswell witnessed Abel's magical power. His attitude changed completely. From an instigator, he suddenly became utterly thrilled as if he had found a kindred spirit, because it turned out he was also a magic enthusiast just like Abel. The story of the genius mage's second life was about to turn a new page, full of complications and humor. The adventure continued when a mysterious character, exuding an overwhelming aura, appeared and criticized Abel's group's totem construction. While everyone was still bewildered, This character offered a knowing smirk, as if holding a great secret about totem magic. Not long after, Abel's group encountered significant trouble. A failed experiment made them fear punishment from the Karlko family. The mysterious blindfolded individual reappeared, offered a sinister smile, and declared they would instruct them, startling young Giselle. To demonstrate his power, Abel summoned a wind blade. More than just a gentle breeze, it tore through the air with terrifying speed, leaving a powerful aftershock, affirming the caliber of a genius mage. The story shifted towards an economic conflict. Abel discovered that the reason incense leaves were so valuable wasn't due to cultivation difficulty, but because the Karlko family monopolized the magical supply. He realized that if he could stabilize the mana source, growing the leaves would be incredibly easy. The village chief wished to change the currency unit to magic ore, to improve living standards, but naturally, the Karlko family vehemently opposed it, fearing a devaluation of their assets accumulated in incense leaves. Unwilling to accept this oppression, Abel and his friends planned to overthrow the Karlko family's monopoly. He declared he would mass-produce high-quality incense leaves, few tell, by transforming the entire forest into giant totems, driving market prices to rock bottom. This plan wasn't just for economic reasons, but also for Giselle. Abel learned that if they failed, his sister might be compelled to marry into the Karlko family, specifically that pampered young man Noswell. This touched a raw nerve for the sister-devoted brother, causing Abel to erupt in fury. Abel's group secretly entered the eastern forest. They erected giant totems disguised as scarecrows, terrifying Noswell's henchmen who were following them, making them mistake the totems for attacking monsters. Noswell, though arrogant, wasn't entirely foolish. He ordered his subordinates to monitor the village chief's residence to prevent magical aid from reaching Abel. However, he gravely underestimated Abel's ability to operate independently. Abel, who had defeated the Bear King 2 years prior, could now maintain a stable mana supply for 50 totems simultaneously without any assistance. He transformed the entire forest into a massive magical farm, producing incense leaves at a dizzying pace. The day of reckoning arrived, the trade fair, coinciding with Abel's coming-of-age ceremony. His group brought tons of premium incense leaves to the market. However, things didn't go smoothly from the start. The stall they secured was in a secluded corner, completely deserted, while the Karlko family's area was bustling with people. Unwilling to concede, Abel unleashed his secret weapon. These were small spherical red and blue totems capable of attracting and enchanting customers. He and his friends began an all-out sales campaign, shouting themselves hoarse to entice buyers. Conflict erupted when a customer compared Abel's product with the Karlko family's. Abel didn't hesitate to expose the Karlko family's use of dark magic and additives to conceal poor quality, while his product was 100% authentic. Quality spoke for itself. Customers began flocking to Abel's stall. They realized his incense leaves were tastier, more fragrant, and half the price. Word spread like wildfire, causing the Karlko family's stall to become deserted. The crowd went wild, scrambling to buy Abel's goods. Even Abel's father had to push his way through to stock up. Noswell was furious, trying to intimidate customers, but it was useless against the appeal of delicious, cheap goods. The peak of the chaos was when Norman Karlko, the head of the Karlko family, Noswell's father, personally appeared. He aggressively approached to question Abel, mistakenly thinking he was the manager of his son's shop. The appearance of the final boss caused the market atmosphere to quiet down. Abel calmly faced him, while Noswell turned pale with fear upon seeing his father. The economic battle between a 15-year-old genius wizard and the region's most powerful family was about to reach a dramatic conclusion. The conflict at the market escalated to its peak when the Karlko family's faction began to use force. Abel, despite holding the upper hand, deliberately played the victim, loudly demanding compensation for his frail father to gain a moral advantage. The enemy lost their composure, charging forward with overwhelming menace. Abel shouted for everyone to step back, but in reality, it was to clear the way for his counterattack. The boy meticulously calculated every move, determined not to strike first so that all subsequent actions would be considered justifiable self-defense. Meanwhile, his opponent arrogantly believed his magical power was invincible. However, before a reincarnated genius, all techniques of this world were riddled with flaws. Abel quickly realized that the opponent's magic circle was not encrypted, meaning he could easily infiltrate and dismantle it. When the colossal fireball hurtled towards him, Abel did not flinch. He decided to toy with his opponent a little, using his superior knowledge. A terrifying energy clash erupted. Abel erected a defensive wall, narrowly blocking the destructive attack, leaving his enemy terrified by the true power of the leaf-selling brat. As the smoke and dust cleared, Abel stood tall amidst the battlefield, proudly challenging anyone who dared to advance. His confidence made the Karlko family's henchmen begin to tremble. The outcome was decided. News of the Karlko family's defeat spread throughout the village like a storm. The price of their medicinal leaves plummeted. The exploited people were liberated, and Karlko's monopoly empire officially collapsed. After the victory, Abel earned a huge fortune from selling fragrant leaves. But money had never been his ultimate goal. With abundant capital, Abel returned to his passion for research. He found the village's land too difficult to cultivate and decided to use his past life's knowledge to create an agricultural revolution. His goal was to build a totem truck, a giant magical machine that could function as a tractor. Abel began to tinker, restructuring old totems into mechanical engines. Meanwhile, his younger sister Giselle, now 14, had always quietly stayed by Abel's side, caring for him meticulously and rarely interacting with outsiders. Abel simply assumed it was pure shyness. One night, Abel sought out his father to discuss business, but his father's attitude was unusually strange. He happily mentioned an upcoming ceremony, leaving Abel completely bewildered. And then, the shocking truth was revealed. Abel's father casually inquired about the blood relation between him and Giselle as a suggestion, leaving Abel utterly confused. It turned out that the Marin family had a peculiar custom. Siblings are expected to unite in marriage if their age difference is less than 5 years, to maintain the purity of the wizard bloodline. Abel was stunned speechless, feeling as if struck by lightning. He tried to object, but his father calmly revealed that he and Abel's mother were also siblings. Abel's worldview completely shattered in the face of this world's strange moral standards. Abel suddenly realized why Noswell and Shibi had acted so strangely when approaching Giselle before. It wasn't that they wanted to flirt with her, but rather they were trying to challenge Abel's claim according to the village's rules. Unable to accept the idea of marrying his own sister, Abel planned to find allies. He was certain that Giselle, an innocent girl, would also be repulsed by this custom and would join him in opposing their parents. To win over his sister before discussing the important matter, Abel completed the magic carriage and invited Giselle to be the first to test it. The girl seemed incredibly happy with her brother's gift. Gathering all his courage, Abel informed Giselle about the marriage rumors, hoping to see a repulsed reaction from her. But completely contrary to his expectations, Giselle blushed, her eyes sparkling with happiness. She confessed that their mother had told her about this 10 years ago, and she had been waiting her entire life for the moment to become Ni-sama's wife. Abel turned to stone on the spot. It turned out that the sister he always wanted to protect was a genuine brocon, brother complex. His last hope of forming an alliance against the marriage had vanished into thin air. Cornered, Abel made an excuse about needing to think to buy time. He realized he couldn't change the customs of an entire clan, and even less could he convince Giselle or their parents. In the chieftain's study, Abel was immersed in torment. He blamed himself for being too engrossed in magic research and neglecting to learn the common knowledge of this world, leading to his current ironic predicament. By chance, he found a map depicting the world outside the village. A glimmer of hope appeared. If he stayed, he would be forced into an unacceptable marriage and bury his life in this small village. A bold decision was made. Abel would escape. He would leave Marin village to explore the vast world outside, which was also the only way to free himself and Giselle from the archaic custom. To deceive everyone, Abel lied that he would lock himself in his room to focus on research for a few days. He instructed friends and family not to disturb him, secretly preparing for his escape in the night. Outside, Giselle innocently brought food to her brother, worried he would exhaust himself with work, completely unaware that the brother she cherished was about to disappear. The story concluded with Abel's heavy sigh. He looked back at the house one last time, carrying his luggage and the secrets of a reincarnated person, stepping into the darkness, leaving behind his clan, his reputation, and the sister who was awaiting a wedding that would never happen. Unable to accept the arranged marriage with his own sister, Abel decided to escape that very night. He left behind a suicide note. No, a farewell letter declaring he would only return when Giselle was married or when he himself found a wife. His means of escape was the totem truck he had meticulously crafted. With his heart pounding, Abel started the machine, carrying the hope of a free life in the world outside. He knew the laws of the Marin clan well. Anyone who left the village without permission would never be allowed to return. But the fear of marrying his sister was greater than the fear of being exiled. Abel gritted his teeth and plunged into the night. However, he hadn't driven far when the truck suddenly malfunctioned and crash! A strong impact sent Abel tumbling head over heels. He was stunned to realize Totem Truckson had died out in the middle of the forest road. When he checked the engine, Abel discovered a horrifying truth. The high-grade magic ore, Liada, he had installed had been secretly replaced by someone with the cheap and weak Emict type. A shiver ran down Abel's spine. The only person who knew this technical secret and had access to the vehicle could only be Giselle. It turned out that his innocent sister had been one step ahead of him, secretly sabotaging his escape plan to keep her brother. Stranded on the road, returning meant losing face and being forced into marriage, while continuing meant no means of transport. Abel fell into extreme panic, but his desire for freedom won out, and he decided to abandon the vehicle and walk, heading towards the city of Lomarn. Fortunately, he was given a ride by a passing carriage. There, Abel met interesting travel companions. James, a cheerful merchant, and Maya, a young girl from the Doom tribe with a sorrowful past. Maya shared that her family had ostracized her because she was born without the crystal on her forehead, a symbol of the Doom clan's power. The empathy between these outcasts quickly drew Abel and Maya closer. The journey was far from smooth, as they were attacked by a pack of Garm, phantom hounds. In a critical situation, Abel was forced to reveal his magical abilities. He unleashed earth magic, creating a powerful tremor that sent the monsters flying, saving the group from certain defeat and leaving his new friends wide-eyed with astonishment. Finally, they reached Lomarn, a city of bustling trade. Overwhelmed by the scale of the outside world, Abel, the country boy, and his friends were left speechless. At a magic artifact shop called Chimera's Tale, Abel discovered rare treasures, a branch from the World Tree and unicorn blood. His instincts as a researcher surged powerfully, but bad news struck. The incense leaves Abel carried to sell were considered contraband in this kingdom. In an instant, he became penniless. Just then, the wealthy Lady Maya generously spent over 2 million gold to help him purchase valuable items, considering it an investment for the future. With high-quality materials in hand, Abel dove into crafting. He created a colossal totem, a masterpiece he believed would change the world and help him repay Maya. A feeling of triumph swelled in his chest until Abel opened his eyes. He found himself lying in a familiar room. There was no city, no Maya, no masterpiece. It was his family's storeroom. The harsh truth struck. The truck had broken down from the very beginning. The collision on page 415 had rendered Abel unconscious. The entire journey to the city, meeting friends, battling monsters, it was all just a long dream, a delusion born of his yearning for freedom during his coma. The door opened, and the final boss appeared. Giselle walked in with a chillingly sweet smile. She gently announced that she had restrained Abel so he wouldn't do anything foolish again. Abel was bound tightly, powerless as his obsessively devoted sister spoon-fed him porridge. He realized that if he swallowed this spoonful, a meal prepared by his future wife, he would officially surrender to fate, forever losing any path of retreat. His dream of freedom had completely shattered at the hands of his sister, who loved him too much. Back in the harsh reality, Abel was restrained. Giselle, with a remorseful expression, but no actual regret, personally fed her brother his meal. She apologized for acting rashly, but insisted it was necessary to prevent Abel from escaping. Abel, in his weakened state, tried to explain that his way of thinking was different from ordinary people because he carried memories of a past life. He wanted to tell Giselle everything someday, but now was not the time. Unexpectedly, a terrible pain struck. Abel felt as if 1,000 needles were pricking him. It turned out Giselle had used an extremely powerful sealing magic on her brother, paralyzing his body. Even if you can no longer walk, everything will be fine, Nisama. Giselle's cold words made Abel shudder. This Brocon sister was willing to incapacitate her brother's legs to keep him by her side forever. In his extreme agony, Abel heard a voice echoing in his head, promising to always be by his side. It wasn't Giselle's voice, but some mysterious power rising to protect him from the sealing magic. Abel woke up with a start, drenched in sweat. He found himself lying on a bed, but not in the storeroom. It was an unfamiliar inn-room. Around him were Maya and his companions. It turned out that the entire story of being abducted by Giselle, subjected to torment and forced to eat, was just a horrifying nightmare Abel had imagined himself during his coma. He had been unconscious for a day and a half after using too much magic to defeat the Garmwolves. In his dream, Abel's subconscious had unconsciously activated an extremely powerful defensive magic circle around his bed, preventing Maya and everyone else from approaching. Its destructive power was so immense that it nearly obliterated the entire area. After recovering his senses, Abel realized he was still in the city of Lomarn and still owed Maya a huge sum of money. He decided he had to do something to repay this kind girl. Abel intended to sell his precious totem mask for money, but Maya firmly refused. She didn't want Abel to sacrifice important things for her. Instead, Maya suggested Abel register as an adventurer at the Adventurer Support Center. With his strength, hunting magical beasts for money would be as easy as pie. At the center, Abel registered under the alias Mant Mountain, inspired by the mysterious senior player from his past life's game. He wanted to conceal his true identity to avoid trouble with the Marin family. Maya, despite knowing Abel was very strong, couldn't help but worry, recalling him single-handedly taking on a horde of magical beasts. She feared there might be even stronger monsters that could endanger Abel's life. While waiting for a mission, Abel and his friends were approached by a boastful captain, inviting them to join his party. Of course, with his independent and slightly arrogant personality, Abel flatly refused. They received information about the Zashum ruins, an ancient elven ruin that had just been unsealed. Rumor had it there were many treasures and powerful magical beasts there, an ideal place to grind levels and earn money. Abel's group entered the ruin area. There, they encountered a giant white bear. With his bear hunting experience from childhood, Abel, who was currently disguised as a blonde girl to conceal his identity, just kidding, it was his female teammate, easily took down the monster. Deep inside the forest, they met a mysterious old elf named Abelheid. He seemed surprised to see a Marin here and immediately recognized Abel's special magic staff. Abelheid revealed he was researching the history of the elven tribe at these ruins, but was having trouble with the magical barriers. He proposed a collaboration. If Abel's group helped him break the seals, he would share the rewards and knowledge. Abel quickly demonstrated his innate talent. He pointed out that there was no need to check every formula on the walls, but the key lay in a central magical core. His wisdom left the scholars accompanying Abelheid utterly astonished. Finally, they found a large room with a gigantic griffin statue. Abel asserted that this was the heart of the sealing system. The journey to uncover the elven tribe's secrets and Abel's true power at the Zisham ruins officially began. Deeper into the ruins, the expedition group was halted by an extremely complex magical barrier. While the other mages were still scratching their heads in confusion, Abel quickly identified it as a multi-frame barrier, a type of overlapping magical puzzle. With the keen eye of a reincarnated genius, Abel pointed out that one of the seal layers was a fake, and its true structure was a 3-layered seal. His profound understanding left the accompanying royal mages speechless. Although he could use brute force to destroy everything, Abel was determined to decipher it delicately to preserve the ruins intact, and more importantly, not to diminish the value of the reward. But trouble always finds its way. As they were engrossed in their research, a piercing scream echoed. From the shadows, hundreds of ferocious hobgoblins swarmed out like ants from a disturbed nest, ambushing the expedition. The situation became chaotic. The warriors had to strain themselves to form a defensive circle against the overwhelming number of enemies. Everyone fought to eliminate the monsters and carve a path to escape. In the heat of the moment, Abel suddenly had a crazy idea. He shouted, demanding the warriors not to slay the hobgoblins but to capture them alive. This bizarre request left everyone bewildered, thinking he had lost his mind. After the battle subsided, Abel explained his plan. To undo this 2,000-year-old ancient seal, they needed a specific source of magical power from a magical beast species that might be extinct. Searching for it was impossible. Therefore, Abel decided to use biomagic. He would rewrite the biological structure of the captured hobgoblins, transforming their internal organs into magical power-producing machines compatible with the seal. An idea that was both brilliant and chilling. To perform the transformation ritual, they needed high-quality magic stones. At this point, the old elf Abelheid didn't hesitate to reveal his treasure trove. Extremely rare king-grade magic stones, which left the entire group wide-eyed with astonishment. With enough materials in hand, Abel flashed the smile of a mad scientist. He began operating on and transforming the goblins. The gruesome and bizarre sight made even seasoned adventurers feel nauseous and turn away. The funny thing was that after transforming them, Abel named each one Goburo, Gobuko, and cheered them on like competing athletes, while the poor goblins were being drained of their energy to power the gate. Finally, Abel's efforts and cruelty paid off. The barrier shattered, and the colossal gate slowly opened, revealing a path deeper into the ruins. The group cheered, believing they were about to lay their hands on a historical treasure. But their joy was short-lived. The colossal griffin statue, the core of the seal, suddenly cracked open. The old elf frantically shouted for everyone to get away, but it was too late. From within the rubble, a dark entity with colossal wings arose. He was no treasure, but a demon king who had been sealed for 2,000 years. He roared in fury, cursing the elves who had imprisoned him. The expedition group realized they had just unleashed a terrible calamity upon the world. The malevolent entity that just escaped its seal turned out to be the King of Griffins, a legendary creature with overwhelming power. He proudly declared that to compensate for 2,000 years of imprisonment, everyone standing here would become sacrifices to his wrath. Immediately, the monster swooped down to attack. But instead of targeting the adventurers, he struck at the goblins Abel had just operated on. Witnessing Goburu, the lead goblin and his cherished creation, being knocked away, Abel flew into a rage. Not out of compassion, but because it dared to destroy the precious biological batteries he had painstakingly crafted. His anger clouded his judgment, and Abel made the mistake of an overconfident individual. He unleashed his signature spell, Windblade, to counterattack. But he forgot a basic fact. Griffins are wind attribute magical beasts and are also protected by spirits. His attack not only failed to inflict any damage, but the monster also mocked it as foolish. It roared in spirit knees, creating a magical pressure that blew Abel away like a dry leaf. The battle unfolded in chaos. While his teammates struggled to defend themselves, Abel realized he couldn't use conventional power. He was forced to detonate a wide-area spell, creating a terrifying shockwave to temporarily repel the monster. When the smoke and dust cleared, the entire expedition team was exhausted, sprawled across the ground. Little Maya and the others all wanted to rest. However, the attitude of the elderly elf chieftain, Abelheid, changed terrifyingly. He yelled and berated everyone's exhaustion as weakness and coldly ordered them to continue moving immediately, despite the group's injuries. During the brief rest by the campfire, Abel secretly took out a homemade potion to restore his clarity. This action did not escape Abelheid's notice. The old man immediately recognized it as a product of biomagic, a forbidden art requiring a national-level license to be used. The suspicion in his eyes grew even larger when Abel innocently admitted he was unaware of this rule, indicating his knowledge came from a completely different era or place. That same night, Abelheid revealed a part of his secret. He admitted he had lived for over 300 years, an unimaginable number even for ordinary elves. He was a descendant of the High Elf lineage, who had dedicated their lives to seeking their ancestors' legacy in these Zesham ruins. The next day, their efforts were rewarded. The final gate opened, leading into a massive treasure chamber. But what overwhelmed everyone wasn't gold or silver, but mountains of pitch-black, king-grade magic stones radiating an endless source of energy. It was at the moment Abel used magic to open the room's seal that Abelheid's mask fell. Heavy mechanical sounds echoed, thudding loudly. From the shadows, a series of colossal combat golems emerged, surrounding Abel's group, and the one standing among them, wearing a triumphant smile, was Abelheid. The kind old elf was no more, replaced by a fanatic bearing the blood of Zesham, an ancient elf tribe once banished from the Sky Kingdom. For the past 300 years, he couldn't undo the ancestral seal, so he exploited Abel's talent to open the way into this armory. Abelheid's goal was utterly insane. He wanted to use all these magic stones to load the Arrow of God, an ancient magical cannon capable of piercing the sky to exact vengeance and reclaim the throne for the Zisham clan. Confident of victory, Abelheid haughtily made an offer. "Become my right-hand man, Abel. I will share half the world with you." Of course, for someone who only wanted to live peacefully and lazily like Abel, the offer to rule the world sounded more troublesome than appealing. He flatly refused. Embarrassment turned to fury. Abelheid ordered his golem army to attack. He believed that with his power to control the relic's defense system, these youngsters would soon be crushed, but he had gravely underestimated his opponent. Facing the colossal combat machines, Abel was unfazed. He squinted, observed, and chuckled. The Zisham clan's magical encryption system from 2,000 years ago might be top secret to modern people, but to a reincarnated genius, it was nothing more than a beginner's problem. Analysis magic, overwrite. With just a snap of his fingers, Abel directly hacked into the golem's control system. To Abelheid's jaw-dropping horror, his golems suddenly stopped and turned to bow to Abel. "Impossible! You don't have magic stones. How can you operate them?" Abelheid cried out in despair. But Abel merely shrugged, using his masterful manipulation of mana flow to turn the golems into his personal bodyguards, ordering them to punch away the remaining enemy golems. Cornered, Abelheid unleashed his final trump card, the White Giants, destructive biological constructs. But even they were stopped by Abel's perfect multi-layered magical barriers. Knowing he couldn't win by force, the old elf frantically fled towards the control panel of the Arrow of God cannon, intending to manually activate it regardless of the consequences. "Don't let him fire!" The entire expedition team hurriedly gave chase. But at the most crucial moment, Abel's weak physique predicament resurfaced. After unleashing a series of high-level spells and racing against time, the genius mage's legs officially gave out. He collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Despite his teammates urging him on, Abel sat down flat, whimpering and complaining that his legs were intensely aching and demanding praise for having run such a long distance. The scene was truly ironic. The mage who had just single-handedly taken on an entire golem army was now whining like a child, forcing his teammates to hoist this dead weight up to continue the chase to prevent the apocalypse. The journey through the ruins continued with Abel having to carry the dead weight Mason on his back. The messy-haired boy turned green in the face from altitude sickness and thin air, muttering questions about why a talented mage like Abel would choose such a dangerous adventurer's profession. Mason's answer, surprisingly, was simple. He became an adventurer simply because he wanted to earn money quickly, and because of a profound memory from the past. It turned out that when he was little, Mason had wandered into a monster's lair and nearly lost his life. In that moment of despair, a passing adventurer saved him, planting the dream in the boy's heart of becoming a hero, even though in reality, he was as cowardly as a mouse. Meanwhile, Maya still harbored a deep-seated insecurity. She felt her power was too insignificant, fearing she wouldn't be able to help in stopping a formidable adversary like Abelheid. However, as a member of the team, and perhaps because she had already boarded the pirate ship, Maya still committed to supporting Mason, the figurehead leader, to the best of her ability. The group continued to ascend to the higher levels of the ruins. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense, a stark contrast to the pathetic expression on the mascot Abel was carrying on his back. Finally, they stood before a colossal door emanating a palpable sense of danger. Abel had a premonition that Abelheid was right behind it, but what awaited them was even more terrifying. The door opened into a vast dark corridor, stretching so far its end was invisible. But Abel's attention was immediately caught by something moving in the shadows. It was a gigantic beast model golem. Abel instantly recognized it as a creation Abelheid had activated in advance to block their path. Maya's face went completely pale with fear. Mason hoped Abel could use his old trick, hacking into the system to control the golem. But Abel shook his head helplessly. This time, Abelheid had cleverly set up protective barriers beforehand, making remote system infiltration impossible. With no shortcuts left, the group was forced to face reality. They had to defeat this destructive machine with pure strength. Abel was about to outline a proper strategy, using resonant magic for a long-range attack. But before he could finish, the foolish Mason let out a courageous or idiotic battle cry and charged straight ahead, causing Abel to startle and stumble. It turned out Mason intended to use himself as bait to distract the monster, creating an opportunity for his teammates to pass. This reckless act left Abel both shocked and bewildered, wondering where this coward found such courage. The sight of tiny Mason charging at the giant, growling metal beast looked exactly like an egg trying to crack a rock. Maya screamed in despair as she saw Mason about to be crushed. Mason himself, at this moment, revealed his true cowardly nature, his face ashen as he faced certain doom. Running for his life, Mason yelled for everyone not to worry about him but to go stop Abelheid. A noble sacrifice, if only he weren't crying while running. Mason even gave his last words, asking them to recount this story and paint him as a hero. But Abel, with a look of exasperation, decided not to let this tragicomedy drag on any longer. He swung his staff, determined to quickly deal with the golem. "Refine!" Abel shouted. Not using conventional offensive magic, he activated alchemy, gathering molecules in the air. A solid, black magical metal block called High-Deem Magi Metal was created in midair. Abel excitedly called the golem a pile of scrap metal and prepared to send it to the junkyard. The golem seemed to sense the threat from the metal block. It paused and turned its head to look, but it was too late. Abel yelled loudly for Mason to get out of the way. The heroic captain was currently standing dumbfounded right in front of the monster's mouth. Boom! The black metal sphere shot down at rocket speed, delivering a critical blow to the golem's head. The immense destructive power created a shocking explosion. The colossal monster shattered into fragments and then dissolved into dust. Maya's jaw dropped in astonishment, while Abel smiled with satisfaction at having dealt with the obstacle. However, Abel's joy was short-lived as his face turned pale. His metal projectile was too powerful. After piercing through the golem, it had also punched a massive hole in one of the ruin's supporting pillars. The entire group broke into a cold sweat at the thought of the compensation costs for the national monument. Mason quickly suggested, "Let's just blame everything on Abelheid." Before they could even agree on a plan to assign blame, the entire ruin began to shake violently as its support pillars gave way. The group was thrown off, free-falling while reassuring themselves that this level of damage is still quite minor. In the chaos, Mason revealed his true opportunistic nature, sprinting towards the emergency exit, abandoning the girl who was crying for help. Maya and the others also panicked, searching for a way out. Even while fleeing, Abel couldn't help but worry about Abelheid's fate. He lamented the potential loss of a 300-year-old living repository of knowledge, soon to be buried under the rubble. Mason was more pragmatic, or perhaps more callous, shouting at Abel to ignore that madman. After all, given his transgressions, even if Abelheid survived and returned, he would still face capital punishment. But Abel had a different thought. He knew that for a proud individual like Abelheid, it would be better to perish with the ruins than to endure the disgrace of an execution. Suddenly, Abel's gaze fell upon the mangled remains of the beast golem on the ground. A crazy idea sparked. Shapeshift! Abel cast a spell on the pile of scrap metal. He intended to repair the golem to use as a means of transport. In the blink of an eye, the mechanical beast was fully restored, transforming into a docile, gigantic mechanical dog. The miraculous repair speed left his teammates speechless. Abel began to ramble on, explaining the energy mechanism and how he optimized the engine. But of course, no one cared about those boring technical theories. They just wanted to climb aboard and leave immediately. Thanks to the golem super vehicle, the group escaped safely just before the area collapsed. Mason sighed in relief, believing Abelheid had been buried. But at that moment, Abel pulled out a strange object he had picked up. It was a fragment from the inner wall of the ruins. At first glance, it looked like ordinary stone, but through Abel's eyes, it held an astonishing secret. Abel realized this was a special type of ore created by the alchemy of the ancient elf tribe. When infused with magic, the stone immediately floated. This material possessed thrust-altering, anti-gravity properties. This meant that the entire ruin was not actually an underground bunker, but a flying fortress. Abel pieced everything together. Why did the Zesham tribe build their base in this remote location? Why did they use this type of stone? The answer was that they had never given up their dream of returning to the sky. Just then, Maya let out a piercing scream, pointing towards the horizon. The group turned and witnessed a horrifying sight. From within the rubble, Abelheid emerged. He laughed maniacally, declaring that the moment of Zisham's revival had arrived. A colossal pillar of light shot into the sky. Abelheid realized his beast golem had been defeated, but that no longer mattered. He believed that after the recent battle and controlling the golem, Abel must be exhausted and depleted of magic. With the arrogance of the elf tribe, he asserted that no outsider could stand against Zesham's ultimate weapon. The ground shook violently. A colossal structure began to separate from its mountain camouflage, slowly ascending. Abelheid stood atop the flying fortress, declaring that he would fire the arrow of the gods at the city of Lomarn below to test the machine and display its power. He roared defiance at the Alfheim heavenly realm, swearing to drag that entire celestial kingdom down to earth. But just as he was enthusiastically delivering his speech, a powerful tremor caused the fortress's protective barrier to crack open. Abelheid was stunned, not understanding where the attack had come from. Below on the ground, Abel's group was gazing up at the colossal, flying triangle with awe. It turned out the recent impact was due to Abel having thrown an entire block of magic metal into the sky. Mason wondered how he threw it so far while Abel only cared about bringing it down immediately. However, disappointment struck as the crack in the fortress's barrier automatically healed itself in an instant. Abelheid looked down through his magic screen, sneering at the futile efforts of the insects. He explained, like a typical villain, that the fortress had a self-repairing mechanism, and to dismantle it, they would have to destroy all energy nodes simultaneously. An impossible feat. Maya gritted her teeth in frustration because her attack had hit its mark but was useless. Mason began to lose heart, thinking that attacking was pointless. But Abel was different. He calmly observed and analyzed. 15 seconds, Abel muttered. That was the time it took for the barrier to fully recover. With a confident smile, Abel presented his strategy. It's simple. Just keep attacking continuously at a faster rate than its recovery speed. Mason just shook his head upon hearing this. This guy really only knows how to brute force everything. On the fortress, Abelheid was furious. He regretted ever wanting to recruit Abel. Now that kid was the biggest thorn in his side. Unable to let his millennium-long plan be ruined, Abelheid decided to unleash full firepower to eliminate Abel's group. Deploy weapons! Numerous cannon barrels from the fortress pointed down at the ground. Gigantic stone pillars rained down like meteorites, embedding themselves in the ground around Abel's group. These stone pillars transformed into turrets, beginning to unleash a barrage of energy blasts. The entire group found themselves in a precarious situation. Abel was unfazed. He summoned Hydeem Magi metal once more, but this time it was a multitude of small orbs hovering around like satellites. These metal orbs shot off at incredible speed, piercing and dismantling the enemy's entire stone cannon system. Abel boasted, "How could my magic metal lose to mere rocks?" Even though he had dismantled the cannons, Abel was still worried about the main weapon, the laser cannon. He knew Abelheid was cornered and would take desperate measures. Indeed, on the fortress, Abelheid frantically activated the Arrow of the Gods at maximum power, accepting the risk to eliminate his adversaries. A massive energy surge began to accumulate, creating tremendous wind pressure that warped the surrounding space. Seeing the colossal energy sphere forming, Mason and Maya were overwhelmed with fear. Only Abel calmly confirmed, "So that's the Arrow of the Gods." Abel explained that the piercing shriek was due to the weapon draining the energy of the sky spirits. This meant the upcoming shot would possess devastating power. Abel determined that ordinary magical metal wouldn't withstand the heat of that attack. Maya wanted to flee, but Abel came up with a bolder idea: to create an attack even more powerful than it. Abel turned and tossed his magic staff to Maya to hold. The old knight, the spirit in the staff, was greatly shocked, asking why he wasn't using the staff. Abel nonchalantly replied, "The staff is just for trivial support. My true power doesn't need it." Abel raised both hands to the sky, beginning to chant the fire sphere spell. But it wasn't an ordinary fire sphere. He compressed the flame, added another layer, compressed it again, then added another. The process repeated continuously to create a super-gravitational fire sphere. He shouted excitedly, "I name it Abel Ball." This was a technique he accidentally came up with when he fainted last time. With a battle-hungry grin, Abel declared, "Here I come, Abelheid." The ultimate confrontation unfolded. The destructive laser beam from the flying fortress and Abel's compressed fire sphere collided. Kaboom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted in mid-air. Blinding light swallowed everything, and shockwaves cleared away clouds for miles around. The power of Abel Ball completely overwhelmed, piercing through Abelheid's attack and striking the fortress. Scene shifts to the peaceful city of Lomarn. At an eatery, Maya was gobbling down a hamburger, eating and anxiously asking, "Is this really okay?" It turned out they were discussing the mission report. Mason let out a long sigh, looking dejected about doing paperwork, even though he did nothing in the recent battle except run and scream. They decided to report that the Griffin and the relic had mysteriously vanished on their own after the explosion. A clumsy lie to hide Abel's true power. Recalling the moment the explosion occurred, Mason had indeed performed a heroic act. He had rushed to shield Abel from the falling debris, despite his face being pale with fear. The case concluded smoothly. Abelheid's ambition to dominate the world was buried in secrecy. No one knew the world had almost been destroyed. At the Adventurers Guild, Maya excitedly recounted the battle to the receptionist, but her limited vocabulary meant she only used onomatopoeia. It went boom, then zap, then Abel did a thump. The professor receiving the report was utterly bewildered. He couldn't understand how a group of youngsters could prevent the collapse of an entire relic, and he was even more perplexed by this jumbled report full of boom-zap sounds. At the association headquarters, the atmosphere grew extremely tense. The corpulent official couldn't believe his eyes when reading the report. He shouted at Mason's group, calling it a fabrication because a lone mage could never stop a collapsing fortress. However, that was exactly what Abel wanted. He sat leisurely drinking tea, secretly feeling fortunate that no one believed that insane truth. If the world knew he had single-handedly saved the entire city from utter destruction, his peaceful life would end immediately. Rumors spread like wildfire. The people in the inn began to buzz about the explosion at the ruins. They whispered that a greedy elf working for the Lord had foolishly activated the ruins' self-destruct mechanism due to insatiable greed. The official information was released. That elf, Abelheid, did not perish in the explosion, but was apprehended. He escaped the death penalty, but will have to spend the rest of his life in a dungeon. Hearing this news, Abel became a little pensive. Although Abelheid was the antagonist who nearly brought about the world's destruction, deep down, Abel still held a certain respect for him. After all, he was the first person to teach him about this world's magic after he left the village. But for a proud elf like Abelheid, living in disgrace and being mocked as a fool by others was perhaps more agonizing than death itself. It was a cruel punishment in its own way. Returning to the adventurer group, Mason, the reluctant hero, had recovered after 2 days bedridden with fear. He happily announced the good news. Thanks to this achievement, which he falsely claimed, he had officially been promoted to E rank. Just then, an ironic situation unfolded. 2 former members of Mason's group, those who had once shunned and expelled him, suddenly appeared with fake smiles, profusely congratulating him. It turned out that after kicking Mason out, their group had performed terribly and consistently failed missions. Now seeing Mason promoted and famous, they shamelessly returned to beg him to rejoin the group and carry them. With his kind and somewhat naive nature, Mason happily agreed to return immediately, without dwelling on past grievances. Abel and Maya exchanged weary glances, concerned that their foolish friend was about to be taken advantage of once more. Meanwhile, in Abel's hometown, Marin Village, a crisis was unfolding. The chieftain called an emergency meeting during the night, his expression extremely serious. The problem lay with the incense leaves. Since Abel's departure, no one in the village, not even the most skilled artisans, could replicate his method of cultivating and caring for the plants, despite Abel having left very detailed notes. Abel's father was furious upon realizing the harsh truth. Those techniques were not written for just anyone to perform. They required supreme magical proficiency and an innate understanding that only Abel possessed. News of the Marin family's failure quickly reached Norman Carlco, the chieftain of the rival clan. The old man cackled with glee, believing that once Abel's incense leaves disappeared from the market, the Carlco family's empire would rise and monopolize the market once more. However, some other members of the Carlco clan were more cautious. They knew that once customers had tasted Abel's premium goods, it would be very difficult for them to return to the cheap, low-quality leaves of old. Nevertheless, Abel's absence was still a golden opportunity for them. Amidst the political and economic calculations of the adults, there was one person who always thought of Abel with the purest and slightly unsettling affection. That was Giselle. The young girl sat alone in the library, looking out the window and worrying about her brother, who was adrift in a foreign land. But sadness quickly turned into determination. Giselle hugged the magic book tightly to her chest, a sharp glint flashing in her eyes. She told herself, "Wait for me, Nisama. This little sister will surely come to bring you home, even if I have to turn this whole world upside down." At the same time, in a distant land to the north, a new threat was emerging. A mysterious black-robed sorcerer attacked and eliminated the monks at Ordi Monastery to release the seal on a wicked staff. From within the staff, the soul of the great sorceress Zolamonia, mistress of knowledge and destruction, was awakened after centuries of slumber. Her liberator appeared extremely confident and arrogant, seemingly harboring a dark scheme. Returning to Lomarn City, Abel decided to visit the western branch of the Adventurers Guild. He brought with him the spoils from his previous journey, the ears and hide of a head-eater demon. The appearance of these items sent shockwaves through the entire guild hall. Veteran adventurers couldn't believe their eyes. The head-eater demon was the terror of the entire region, with skin so tough it could break any sword, yet it was vanquished by a rookie. However, instead of admiration, Abel only received looks filled with suspicion and envy. The crowd whispered, some claiming he faked it, others suggesting he merely got lucky and found the remains of an already deceased monster. Abel sighed wearily. He realized that in this world, exceptional talent wasn't always welcomed, especially when it appeared in a seemingly frail boy like him. Nevertheless, the appraiser confirmed it was 100% genuine. The bespectacled girl at the counter shrieked with excitement, thrilled to touch such a rare material for the first time, forcing Abel to shush her, not wanting to draw more attention. But the real trouble was just beginning. Abel knew that if he advanced to rank C thanks to this achievement, he would catch the eye of the nobility. Being recruited by powerful families meant losing his freedom, something he valued more than gold. Just as Abel was deep in thought, a giant in iron armor approached. It was Gaston Gourand, a seasoned rank D adventurer notorious for being a bully. He loudly accused Abel of being a liar to assert his dominance. Instead of fear, Abel saw an opportunity in this brawny but dim-witted fellow. He realized Gaston had brute strength but lacked the skills to advance, making him a perfect pawn for his plan. Abel calmly suggested Gaston step into the alley behind for a private chat. The crowd assumed the boy was about to get a severe beating, while Abel's companions were extremely worried. In the deserted alley, Abel laid his cards on the table. He admitted he didn't want this troublesome fame. He didn't want to be envied by other hunters or scrutinized by nobles. So Abel made an offer Gaston couldn't refuse. Gaston would claim credit for defeating the monster and enjoy all the fame and the promotion. In return, Gaston would act as Abel's errand boy, exchanging the money and handing over the entire reward to him. Gaston, who had intended to rob the boy, was now completely stunned. He never expected someone to disdain fame so much as to hand over such an opportunity. You're really letting me take all the credit?" Gaston stammered, asking again. With the radiant smile of a cunning merchant, Abel concluded, "One gets the reputation, the other gets the reward. Isn't that a great deal for both of us?" As they emerged from the alley, Gaston's subordinates eagerly rushed over, thinking their boss had just taught the boy a lesson. But surprisingly, Gaston turned and gave one of his subordinates a beating for daring to threaten a small girl earlier. He roared moralistic words about protecting the weak, pretending to be a righteous hero, though in reality he was putting on a show to maintain his newly acquired heroic image. Back at the inn, Abel gleefully showed off his heavy money pouch to Maya and their new friend. He explained that by selling that empty fame to Gaston, they now had enough funds to operate comfortably without worrying about anyone bothering them. Maya, the innocent Doom Tribe girl, became distraught. She thought Abel was earning so much money to pay off her debt and send her away. With the sensitive heart of a child who had once been abandoned, Maya burst into tears. Abel quickly reassured the girl. He explained that he wasn't ungrateful, but the real reason he needed Z's so much money was for a much grander ambition. He wanted to create unprecedented magical tools, superior golems, and especially a hand phone right here in this fantasy world. Abel enthusiastically explained his theory of magic waves, about using special monsters capable of long-distance communication as transmission towers. Maya listened, wide-eyed and bewildered, not understanding what this talking brick Abel described was. Just as Abel was excited about his technological revolution plan, a knock echoed at the door. The door opened, and the smile on Abel's face vanished. An uninvited guest had arrived, signaling that new troubles were about to descend upon the reluctant inventor's life. By a nearby river, Maya shivered, recalling the horrifying sight of headless fish floating on the water. Abel speculated that this was the work of a carnivorous demon, signaling a danger lurking closer than they imagined. At the same time, at the checkpoint, grim news arrived. An urgent order from the Lord required all adventurers below rank B to immediately withdraw. It seemed a major incident had occurred, forcing the authorities to seal off the area. The truth was revealed. An elite army of the Lord had been ambushed and completely wiped out in the forest. The enemies were not humans, but brutal shadow creatures turning the forest into a death trap, with the bodies of humans and wolves scattered everywhere. Despite the prohibition, Abel's group ventured deep into the forest. Maya trembled, repeating the warning that only B-rank adventurers had a chance of survival. But Abel remained calm, confident in his experience of having taken down a griffin. They were searching for the true culprit, a living tree that could move. While Maya nervously looked around, afraid of every bush, Abel seemed as excited as a child about to find a new toy. The journey was not smooth. The treacherous terrain caused one of the group members to sprain an ankle. Abel was forced to swallow a stamina-boosting pill to maintain his alertness and endurance for his frail body. To avoid being ambushed, Maya used her magic detecting wand. However, having to keep her arm raised throughout the journey made her utterly aching. Seeing this, Abel suddenly remembered he had a much smarter solution. He summoned a hovering golem head to act as a scout. This tireless machine would detect sources of magic power in place of a human. Abel clicked his tongue in regret for not thinking of this sooner to avoid wearing himself out walking. Along the way, they discussed the possibility of teleportation. Abel explained that he could teleport objects containing large amounts of magic power, like the World Tree Totem. But with luggage or ordinary people, it was a challenge. Maya, the girl from the Doom clan with teleportation abilities, confessed that her magic had limits. She could only teleport herself to places where magic circles had been established beforehand, not freely teleport at will. Once again, the fear of being abandoned haunted Maya. She panicked and clung to Abel, pleading with him not to leave her alone in this terrifying forest, vowing to do all the heavy work to be allowed to come along. Abel's true objective gradually emerged. He wanted to find the monster tree, not to destroy it, but to craft totems. To Abel, that terrifying monster was merely an abundant source of magical materials waiting to be harvested. The deeper they went, the denser the magical presence became. They found giant popolga flowers blooming unusually with vibrant colors, proving that the mana concentration in this area was extremely high, especially the purple flower, a rare variant that only appears where mutated magic power exists. Abel asserted that the final boss was very close, and then it appeared. A glowing entity hovered amidst the trees, proclaiming itself a god and issuing an ultimatum: "Worship me or perish." Beside it were trees with grotesque faces, growling. Abel quickly identified the enemy. This was no ordinary magical beast, but an evil bound, a demon-possessed tree, or more precisely, a collection of malevolent spirits possessing plants. Before them was a colossal ancient tree with a distorted face, radiating a palpable killing intent. It was the legendary spirit beast, the one that had annihilated the Lord's army. The monster flew into a rage when compared to a lifeless statue. It lashed out with its gigantic roots, smashing everything around. Abel yelled for Maya to run, while he himself stood to face the wrath of nature. "I'll show you the power of a masterpiece," Abel declared. He activated the golem scout head, transforming it into a magical projectile that launched straight at the enemy with blinding speed. But the tree monster was no pushover. It controlled roots and wood fragments, making them hover like satellites, deflecting Abel's attacks and scolding him as an insolent brat. Unwilling to yield, Abel summoned a gigantic magical fist, striking the tree's trunk forcefully. The impact made the monster stagger, but its thick wooden bark still withstood it. Abel realized that psychological tactics or feints were useless against this type of monster. He decided to bring out the heavy artillery, summoning the World Tree Totem, the colossal drum, to roll into the fray. However, the World Tree Totem was designed for versatility, not specialized combat. Abel realized he was severely lacking in offensive capability and began to conceive an idea for a totem dedicated to warfare. During the battle, Abel's researcher instincts resurfaced. He observed how the monster distributed its magic to each root and marveled at its multi-point attack mechanism, completely forgetting he was on the brink of life and death. The monster, feeling insulted by its opponent's lack of focus, unleashed a terrifying storm of magic, blowing both Abel and Maya away. The overwhelming power of a self-proclaimed god left them stunned. Disaster struck when Abel's World Tree Totem was shattered. Maya screamed in despair, thinking their strongest weapon had been destroyed. The monster laughed triumphantly, boastfully declaring its power far surpassed humanity's wooden toys. But it didn't know that provoking a magic engineer was the biggest mistake of its life. Abel stood up, brushing the dust off his clothes. His eyes no longer held curiosity but turned cold. "Thanks for the lesson," he muttered. "I now know how to improve my totem." "Playtime's over now," Abel declared. The tree monster was dumbfounded, unable to believe that the recent life-or-death battle was merely a warm-up for this kid to collect data. Abel raised his staff, activating an ancient magic of the Marin family. "Evil spirits, rest in peace." He didn't use power to destroy the tree, but a purification technique to separate the malevolent spirits from their host. In an instant, the malevolent aura vanished. The evil spirits dissipated into nothingness, leaving the tree as a lifeless wooden husk. Maya was astonished by Abel's clean and intelligent victory. Now it was time to reap the spoils. Abel rushed to the tree's roots, where centuries of magical essence had accumulated. He exclaimed with joy as if he'd struck gold. "Excellent magical conductivity. I can make pianos, golem joints, all sorts of things." Abel was so excited that he decided to camp right there to craft, disregarding his companion's exhaustion. And so, from the monster's remains, a new masterpiece was born. Ashura 5000, Abel's first combat totem. He excitedly ordered it to dance, while Maya looked at him with a speechless expression. Mission accomplished. The forest monster was eliminated, and even recycled into toys for Abel. Abel filled the hole with earth, silently thanking the monster for donating its body to science. On the way back, Abel gleefully calculated how much money these tree roots would sell for to fund his mobile phone project. Maya, meanwhile, just wanted to get back to the inn for a good night's sleep. At the same time, in a distant place, the demon queen Zolomonia sensed the disappearance of her old friend, the tree monster. She showed surprise and amusement, deciding to head towards Lomarn City with her black-clad subordinate to investigate the matter. The two antagonists began their journey by ravaging villages along the way, leaving behind wild laughter and chaos, heralding an approaching storm for Lomarn. In Lomarn City, the situation for adventurers was dire. Due to the ban on entering the forest, they lost their source of income and fell into destitution, even considering abandoning their profession. Suddenly, good news exploded. The great Gaston-san had vanquished the monster and cleared the northern forest. The ban was lifted. The entire guild hall erupted in joy. Some still doubted Gaston's abilities, but the truth was he held a bundle of the monster's roots, given by Abel for credit. The guild appraisers confirmed that the black roots belonged to the telepathic black root tree, a legendary B+ rank monster. Gaston's reputation soared instantly. Gaston was hailed as the city's savior. The crowd surrounded him, cheering his name. From a despised outcast, Gaston now reveled in the glory of admiration. In a hidden corner, Abel smiled contentedly. He was happy to have passed on the notorious trouble to someone else, so he could continue his research in peace without being disturbed. But his joy was short-lived. A panicked man ran into the city shouting that something terrible was attacking. The crowd immediately turned to Gaston, expecting the hero who had just eliminated a B+ monster to easily handle this new threat. Gaston broke out in a cold sweat, realizing he had bitten off more than he could chew. In the midst of the chaos, Mason rushed to pull Abel away. He delivered bad news. Their two friends, Teed and Lisa, were in trouble. Upon arriving, the sight before them horrified everyone. Teed and Lisa had been turned into stone statues, standing starkly in the middle of the street. Abel realized this was advanced petrification magic. The attacker was not a beast, but an evil sorcerer. The situation worsened when Gaston and other adventurers who came to help were also turned to stone. The entire square became a terrifying museum of human statues. The enemy revealed himself. It was Zolomonia's black-clad subordinate. He stood high above, mocking the foolishness of those who walked into his trap. He unleashed destructive spells without hesitation in the middle of the city, declaring that he would let everyone taste the power of the great demon Zolomonia. A giant fireball was launched. Abel shouted for Maya and Mason to come closer for protection. The situation was extremely perilous. To deflect the attack, Abel was forced to make a bold and somewhat ruthless decision. Use the stone statue of a citizen as a shield. His companions were horrified by this action, but Abel reassured them that as long as the statue didn't break, the person inside would be safe. Now, amidst a forest of petrified people, Abel had to find a way to fight the mad sorcerer without breaking anyone. A difficult problem for the magic genius. He was a black-robed sorcerer with a maniacal grin, clutching a magic staff that radiated intense malice. Abel quickly recognized the danger from the weapon, and the sorcerer's ramblings about demons only heightened his concern. The enemy was confident in his petrification magic, believing it to be simple and effective. However, Abel had already finished analyzing the spell's structure. He concluded the quickest and most effective way to break the curse was to thoroughly defeat the caster. Not only did Abel want to defeat the enemy, but he also had his eye on the sorcerer's special magic staff. He whispered to Maya about his intention to borrow the toy, and despite her fear, she nodded in agreement. The battle plan was laid out. Mason, in his familiar role as punching bag, would act as bait to attract attention. Maya also volunteered to run around to cause a distraction. Abel agreed, considering this the safest approach for him. The black-clad enemy began to charge, provoking them. According to the plan, Mason split off and ran in a different direction, drawing the enemy's attention. Abel and Maya also began to move into position. The black-robed sorcerer fell into the trap, sneering as he pursued Mason and Maya, believing these two weak targets couldn't escape his grasp. Mason's panicked and somewhat exaggerated screams echoed everywhere, but he didn't realize that the real hunter was waiting behind him. Crash! A massive impact resounded. Abel appeared from behind, unleashing a powerful wind spell. The enemy only managed to hear a warning cry from his allies, or perhaps his subconscious, but it was too late to react. The whirlwind flung the black-robed sorcerer into the air, then slammed him hard onto the ground. The impact was so severe that he coughed up blood, lying flattened on the ground. Abel walked over coldly. He assessed that this individual was entirely dependent on his staff, and now, ambushed and disarmed, he was no longer a threat. However, this individual's endurance was greater than Abel had imagined. He still managed to scramble back up after the potentially fatal fall, glaring at Abel with intense hatred. In his agony, he began to ramble about his tragic past. He had once been a sorcerer exiled by the villagers simply for his passion for studying magic. He cursed this world as corrupt and unjust. And then, he revealed his true purpose. He wanted the world to tremble before the power of magic and demons. He was the one who had broken the seal to unleash the great demon Zolomonia. His words reminded Abel of someone else who had said similar things not long ago. Abelheid. Abel sighed. Both Abelheid and this man were isolated individuals, rejected by society for their unusual talents and passions, leading them to become twisted and extreme. Abel himself felt a sense of regret for them. He was luckier to have his master, the chieftain, and memories of his old friend Yama from his previous life who had always supported him. Without them, who knows, he might have become a villain like this. Setting aside philosophical thoughts, Abel focused on dealing with the aftermath. He walked over to check the sorcerer's staff before dispelling the petrification spell for everyone. But just then, the sky darkened. A terrifying entity appeared. The ancient great demon, Zolomonia, with black wings and overwhelming power, had officially revealed herself before Abel. The black-robed sorcerer joyfully called out her master's name. Zolomonia looked down with contempt, mocking her useless subordinate for wasting too much time with brats. She declared she would play around with Abel for a bit since she was free. The arrogance of an ancient entity made the atmosphere suffocating. Zolomonia unleashed chantless magic, attacking relentlessly. Abel hastily erected a wall of light for defense, but was still pushed back by that terrifying power. Still reeling from shock, Abel had to face another threat. A giant green-skinned girl appeared, unleashing a sweeping attack at dizzying speed. Abel realized there wasn't just one enemy. The mysterious voice, a guide, in Abel's head yelled, ordering him to blast her away. Abel gritted his teeth. I'd love to, but the problem was they were in the middle of a residential area. If Abel unleashed a destructive attack, innocent civilians and even those who were petrified would be caught in the crossfire. He was forced to restrain his power and focus on precision. The situation became difficult. Zolamonia was too fast, and Abel was restricted. Suddenly, Abel remembered the mysterious voice's suggestion about using that thing. Having no other choice, Abel decided to unleash his heavy hitter. He summoned his totem, Ashura 5000, a giant wooden statue with combat capabilities. The appearance of the totem astonished Zolamonia, who was currently in the form of a white-haired, dark-skinned girl. She recognized the familiar aura of the Marin tribe. Abel's totem wasn't just for show. It lunged at Zolamonia with terrifying physical might, forcing her to struggle and evade. Seizing the opportunity, Abel unleashed a powerful sealing spell. A massive magic circle enveloped Zolamonia, repelling her dark energy. I've got you! A light-haired female warrior, an ally, suddenly charged out, grabbing hold of the now disadvantaged Zolamonia. Abel shouted, ordering Maya to raise the black-robed sorcerer's staff. He intended to use the enemy's own weapon to seal this demon. Maya and Mazen worked together to firmly hold the glowing staff. Despite their fear, they had absolute trust in Abel. Zolamonia, now revealed in her true form as the Black-Winged Chieftain, was stunned. She realized Abel wasn't just a child, but a true monster, capable of defeating and transforming her old friend, the demon tree, into a totem, and now sealing her as well. Who exactly are you? Zolamonia shrieked in despair. Abel merely smiled mischievously. Now then, what should I do with you? The masked individual, perhaps another personality of Abel or a mysterious ally, picked up the staff, a sinister grin spreading across their face as they contemplated the interesting experiments they could perform with the sealing power within. The spell was dispelled. The petrified villagers began to return to normal, but Abel exclaimed, "This is bad." He realized that if the villagers saw him holding Zolamonia's staff in this situation, he would be misunderstood as the mastermind or someone involved with dark forces, especially after the Abelheid incident. The staff was too heavy to carry, but throwing it away would be a waste. Abel was about to bury it when an idea struck him. A figure rushed in at rocket speed. It was Gaston. In the chaos, Abel accidentally tossed the staff into Gaston's hands. The large man, who had just woken up after being petrified, instinctively grabbed the staff in a daze. The surrounding villagers woke up, cheering joyfully as they saw their bodies had returned to normal. And what met their eyes was the image of Hero Gaston, standing tall, holding the evil sorcerer's staff. "That's his staff! Gaston defeated him!" The crowd roared. Once again, Gaston unwillingly became the savior hero. The villagers cheered and thanked him profusely, while Gaston still didn't understand what had just happened. Watching Gaston being revered like a living god, Abel and Maya could only shake their heads in exasperation. A cult worshipping Gaston had begun to form right before their eyes. Gaston's reputation spread throughout the Dinrad kingdom. From an unknown nobody, he became a living legend, despite having no skills beyond sheer luck and thick skin. But that's a story for another time. Abel decided to flee Lomarn City before getting caught up in new troubles. He had saved enough money, and now it was time to continue his research journey. Next destination, Ashim City, home to the colossal library of the Kudul faith. Here, Abel immersed himself in a sea of knowledge. The Kudul religion was open and non-discriminatory, allowing him access to valuable documents without restriction. Abel's research goal remained the Magic Phone project. He was searching for magical devices that could serve as signal broadcasting stations to popularize this invention worldwide. During his research, Abel discovered a book by the alchemist Altamia, who had passed away 80 years prior. The book's content was extremely cryptic and provocative, making Abel curious about this individual. He wanted to find someone from that era to ask about Altamia. Long-lived beings like elves or wise dragons might know. Abel regretted not asking Abelheid when he had the chance. Meanwhile, Maya was engrossed in reading Wigner's travelogue. She wholeheartedly believed the exaggerated tales of the hero Wigner, who had vanquished dragons for 3 days and 3 nights, which worried Abel about her innocence. Abel encountered a mysterious black-haired girl at the library. She seemed interested in books, but her true purpose was to inquire about a strange organization emerging in Lomarn. The girl asked Maya if she knew anything about that organization, especially about people with horns and gems on their heads, characteristics of the Doom tribe. Abel was startled. The Doom tribe? Why were they in Lomarn? And why were they looking for Maya, a child abandoned for not having a gem on her head? Maya was terrified, unable to believe that the family who had once cast her aside was now going to such lengths to find her. As for Abel, he clenched his fists, sensing a new storm approaching, threatening the life of his little adopted sister. At a large library in Ashim, an unexpected incident occurred. Maya fainted right in the middle of the library, collapsing to the floor. Abel frantically caught her, but before he could understand what was happening, another event unfolded. A stranger in iron armor appeared, pointing a sword at the unconscious girl. A shout of "Sword!" rang out, creating an atmosphere of extreme tension. Meanwhile, in Abel's hometown, Marin Village, the situation was becoming chaotic. An angry crowd of villagers gathered in front of the chief's house, shouting demands to see their leader. The cause of this unrest stemmed from medicinal leaves. The villagers were furious because the supply of high-quality Abel's fragrant leaves had suddenly been cut off. They refused to return to using Karlko's inferior medicinal leaves after becoming addicted to Abel's product. The protest escalated when they learned that Abel could no longer produce more leaves because he had left. At the same time, at Abel's house, the dog Abel, sharing his owner's name, barked loudly, pulling Giselle in a certain direction. The animal seemed to sense something unusual. In a dark room, a tense private meeting of the village elders was taking place. They were searching for the person who had leaked information about Abel's departure, causing the villagers to revolt. The elders were divided into two factions. One side blamed Chief Karlko's foolishness for attempting to monopolize the market. The other side worried about being unable to control the crowd desperate for the leaves. They realized their mistake in underestimating the influence of Abel's product. The situation compelled them to make an unprecedented decision. Chief Marin, with a serious expression, declared, "There's no other way. We must break the rules and bring Abel back." From a hidden corner, Giselle smiled triumphantly. It turned out that all this chaos was part of her plan. She had secretly pulled strings, spreading rumors to force the elders to act. Giselle hugged the magic book tightly, whispering, "Excellent," just as Shimsan said. She had exploited the villagers' discontent to create a pretext for a large-scale search. Giselle's ultimate goal was to make the entire family mobilize forces to find Abel. This way, they'll soon send people to look for Nisama, she murmured to herself with a mysterious smile. However, Giselle's actions did not go unnoticed by everyone. A mysterious figure, possibly an elder or a spy, was secretly observing her from afar, suspicious of the true motives of this genius child. Back in the present, Maya had regained consciousness after fainting. On the sickbed, she began to tell Abel and his companion about her painful past, the reason she always feared abandonment. Maya was the daughter of the Doom clan's chieftain, but because she was born without a magic crystal on her forehead, the symbol of the clan's power, she was considered a disgrace and confined to the house for many years. One day, she escaped that prison by hiding in the merchant Jamie's cart. Maya's dream was simple: to see the vast world with someone. She burst into tears, saying that meeting Abel and Jamie was the happiest thing in her life, as they were the first people to treat her like a normal human being. Maya also shared about her distant relationship with her biological father. He had never spoken to her or looked at her kindly. Therefore, she couldn't believe that the Doom clan was going to such lengths to search for a failure like her. After hearing the story, Abel made a decision without hesitation. He held Maya's hand, smiling reassuringly. "If they're chasing you, we'll run away together. I won't let anyone take you." Abel's promise moved Maya to tears. The group decided to leave Asham immediately to avoid the Doom clan's pursuit. Although Abel regretted leaving the treasure trove of books in the library, Maya's safety was paramount. They needed to find a secluded hideout to lie low. Meanwhile, in Marin Village, the search party for Abel was officially formed and set off. The group consisted of the clan's most elite warriors, led by Abel's childhood friends. This journey was historic, as they were the first to break the ban. Leaving the village leads to regret, to venture into the outside world. The villagers saw them off, hoping they would soon bring Abel and the secrets to growing tobacco back. Giselle also joined the search party. She reassured her mother that she would bring her brother back at all costs. In her hand was still the mysterious magic book. Along the way, the team members began to notice Giselle's strangeness. She often talked to herself with the book, and the atmosphere around her exuded something very unusual. She was no longer the innocent little sister they once knew. The truth was revealed. The book was a relic from Giselle's grandfather's library. After Abel left, Giselle plunged into studying dark magic to find a way to catch up with her brother, and it seemed the book contained a soul or will that was guiding her. News of the Marin clan's group quickly reached outside forces. In Lomarn City, spies reported an enigmatic group of white-haired individuals moving towards Ashim. The hunters, possibly from the Doom clan or another power, speculated that Maya was with this Marin group. The pursuit began to intensify as multiple factions targeted the same objective. However, the search party's journey encountered an obstacle. They were stopped at the border by guards who refused to allow them to proceed for security reasons. The real reason was that an A-rank magical monster had devastated the area yesterday, causing a landslide and blocking the main road. Repairs would take a week. But for the proud Marin clan members, the laws of the Dinrod kingdom held no value. They decided to breach the checkpoint by force if necessary, declaring that they were not bound by the laws of ordinary people. Suddenly, a pitch-black object plummeted from the sky at breakneck speed, terrifying both the guards and the search party. It was a member of the Marin clan, possibly Abel's father, or a high-ranking warrior, who delivered a greeting punch, blowing away all obstacles in their path. At the same time, elsewhere, a horned warrior from the Doom clan swore to bring Maya back no matter the cost. The race to find Maya and Abel was heating up by the hour. Back to Abel's group. After leaving Asham, they decided to head west, to a remote rural territory called Farge. In Farge, Abel quickly adapted to his new life. He was seen wandering the fields, checking the soil quality. When questioned by the Lord's butler, Abel explained that he wanted to help solve the region's problem of poor harvests. Farge was a poor borderland, isolated for the past half-month because a magical beast blocked trade routes. The adventurers were at their wits' end, and the Lord was desperate. The arrival of Abel's group was like a final ray of hope. Abel did not disappoint. He confronted the colossal three-headed dragon that had been wreaking havoc. With overwhelming power and the aid of the totems, Abel defeated this A-rank monster. Abel's victory was warmly welcomed. The Lord and people of Farge regarded him as their savior. But Abel had a strange request. He refused the reward, money and fame. In return, he wanted the Lord to keep his identity a secret and allow his group to take refuge there, while also providing a private laboratory. The Lord happily agreed. For Abel, this was a favorable agreement. He had a quiet, secluded place to hide and continue his research, far from the scrutiny of the outside world. Maya felt guilty for dragging Abel into trouble that forced him to flee, but Abel reassured her that he genuinely liked this place. It was peaceful here, the land was good, and most importantly, no one bothered him. Abel began his agricultural research in Farge. He discovered that the soil here had special magical properties, completely different from his homeland. He believed that if he could unravel this secret, he could create new breakthroughs in cultivation and the crafting of magical tools. "I will create a new craze in the magical world from this rustic corner," Abel declared excitedly. The rural life of the mad scientist began. Meanwhile, in Lomarn, the truth about the hero Gaston was finally revealed, or at least suspected. Those who knew began to worry as Gaston grew increasingly famous and delved deeper into this fabricated role. One day, it rained heavily in Farge. The prolonged downpour threatened to wash away the precious totem gourds that Abel had just planted. Abel stood in the pouring rain, shouting in despair. He couldn't let his efforts go to waste. Despite Maya trying to stop him, fearing he would get sick, Abel decided to act. "Let's go, Ashura 5000! Abel summoned his combat golem. He didn't use it to shield from the rain, but to blast away the clouds. Ashura 5000 unleashed a massive energy blast into the sky, combining with Abel's wind magic to tear apart the heavens. Boom! The rain clouds were completely blown away. The sky cleared instantly. The villagers of Farge gaped, seeing someone use violence to combat a natural disaster for the first time. They called him a mad wizard. The consequence was that the next day, Abel was bedridden, not from exhaustion due to using magic, but because of a cold. The great wizard who could blow away rain clouds was now groaning as if at death's door from a mild fever. Maya panicked while the doctor merely sighed, prescribed medicine, and told him to stop his foolish antics. In his delirium, Abel still muttered about his gourds. Maya had to stay by his side to care for him, comforting him that the World Tree Totem was watching over the fields for him. That night, as Abel slept soundly, a strange phenomenon occurred. Maya lay beside him, and in her dream she whispered that she would always be by Abel's side. Her closed eyes suddenly emitted a mysterious light. A tiny fairy, perhaps a spirit or Maya's subconscious, appeared, placed her hand on Abel's forehead, and healed him. At the same time, in the night sky, a giant circle of light symbol appeared, radiating tremendous power. Everyone, from Giselle's group on their search to other mysterious forces, looked up at the sky and witnessed this omen. It signaled a momentous event about to unfold. The next morning, Abel leapt out of bed, healthy as if he had never been ill. He shouted excitedly, "The magic circle from my dream! I have to try it now!" Ignoring Maya's astonishment, Abel rushed outside, embarking on an even crazier new experiment, promising to turn this world upside down once more. The scene shifts to the hill behind the Lord's Manor in Farge. In the vast open space, Maya stood alone, surrounded by surging magical energy. The wind tousled her hair and the hem of her dress, creating an image that was both powerful and solitary. Not far away, Shaim, the girl with braided hair, gaped in astonishment. She couldn't believe her eyes at what was unfolding. Immense power was being unleashed right before her. Abel, meanwhile, cheered with delight like a child. His magic circle from the dream experiment was resoundingly successful. He had just created an unprecedented phenomenon, and naturally, he was prouder of it than anyone. Abel excitedly explained that these genius ideas often came to him whenever he was ill. "Maybe I should get sick more often," he joked, but sounded serious. Sheem, on the other hand, was on tenterhooks, fearing that this mischief would anger the Lord. Looking at the giant column of water spraying into the sky, the result of his experiment, Abel began to rack his brain for a truly catchy name for this new technique, while also needing to devise a plausible excuse to explain the mess he had just created to the Lord. But his joy was short-lived. At a nearby cliff, 3 mysterious figures appeared. The one in the middle had horns on his head, looking down with a cold gaze. "I found you, Maya." The pursuers from the Doom clan had finally caught up. Meanwhile, in the nearby forest, 2 unfamiliar men saw a column of smoke rising from the direction of the Lord's Manor. They wondered about its origin, unaware that it was a sign of a fateful reunion. One of the 2 men, the one with a goatee, was hailed. It turned out to be an acquaintance. It was a mysterious cloaked man with a lightning bolt symbol on his forehead. His angry and tense gaze signaled big trouble approaching. "Ah, Abel!" a familiar voice rang out through the mountains and forest. Back with Abel's group, after causing the water explosion, he casually invited Maya to breakfast, starving after days of being bedridden with illness. Maya was still worried about the consequences, but Abel reassured her that he would use the construction totem to fix everything later. As he stood on the hill looking down at the town, Abel suddenly noticed an unusual commotion below. He narrowed his eyes to observe. A Lord's servant ran up to inform them that they had visitors. Abel was surprised, and the servant hinted that these guests were connected to the bright-haired girl, Maya. From the forest, 3 mysterious figures emerged. It was the Doom clan's pursuit group. Maya was stunned. Her eyes widened in horror as she recognized the familiar faces. Past fears flooded back. "Father!" Abel exclaimed in astonishment. But it wasn't his father, it was Maya's father, the Doom clan's chief. Both sides froze upon seeing each other. The Doom clan chief, the blindfolded man, smiled faintly and called his daughter's name. Mia. But his next sentence was as cold as ice. "Let's go home." It wasn't a suggestion, but a command. Abel, red hair in this image due to lighting or color error, but it is Abel, was deeply shocked. He recognized the man's seriousness and immense pressure. Without hesitation, Abel lunged forward to shield Maya. He shouted, Maya said she doesn't want to go home. If you don't care about her, then leave her alone. An argument erupted. Shaim also spoke up in defense, questioning why he had abandoned his daughter for so many years, only to demand her return now. Conversely, Maya's father recognized Abel's and Shaim's attire, suspecting them to be from the Marin clan. Maya's father mumbled, "So Maya's power is finally beginning to awaken." This statement confused Abel. It turned out he wasn't looking for Mia out of affection, but because of some hidden power. The atmosphere became extremely tense. A Doom clan subordinate warned Abel to step aside. Abel immediately activated his teleportation spell, while the opponent was also ready to attack. The battle erupted. A colossal stone pillar with bandaged arms attacked Abel's group. Abel quickly parried the blow, protecting Maya behind him. "Mia, get on!" Abel yelled. A cylindrical flying device, perhaps a new form of totem, appeared. He intended to help Maya escape. The flying device shot off at breakneck speed, but it struggled to move through the dense jungle. Abel realized the enemy had no intention of negotiating. At the same time, a terrifying colossal machine appeared, blocking their path and startling the entire group. An armored warrior, a Doom clan subordinate, pursued them relentlessly. Maya and Shaim were utterly terrified witnessing his destructive power. "It seems we have no other choice but to fight," Abel muttered, his eyes becoming resolute. Abel turned to Maya and asked, "Is it all right if I defeat your father and his subordinates?" Maya hesitated, but when asked again if she wanted to return, she had her answer. "I don't want to go back," Maya screamed. That affirmation was more than enough for Abel. "All right then, Earth Rage!" Abel unleashed his attack. The ground cracked open, erupting violently. The Doom clan soldiers were thrown into the air, but a red-haired warrior from the enemy side still stood firm, looking annoyed. "Go, Ashura!" Abel summoned his combat golem. Ashura charged to attack the red-haired warrior. Abel was astonished to see that old warrior could keep up with Ashura's speed. "Is that old man a monster?" he exclaimed. The long-haired warrior, with a gem on his forehead, clenched his fist preparing to counterattack. He was a true master. He unleashed a punch that shook the ground, creating a powerful shockwave that made Ashura stagger. Abel was forced to erect an earth wall for defense. "O Earth, become a wall!" he shouted. But another enemy cylindrical machine rushed forward at rocket speed, shattering the defensive wall and defeating Ashura. Abel was severely stunned. He hadn't expected the enemy to be so powerful. A gigantic object fell from the sky right in front of him. With no other option, Abel decided to play his trump card. He summoned Hydeem Magic Metal, the super hard material he once used to craft bullets. After a devastating attack with the magic metal, Abel looked at the devastated battlefield and wondered, "Did I overdo it?" Maya's father observed from a distance, realizing Abel was a Marin tribe mage. He pondered why someone from that reclusive tribe would side with his daughter. "The world's distortion is growing," he mumbled. Maya worried for Abel when she saw him fighting alone against giant insect monsters. Ashura was completely defeated, lying shattered on the ground. Abel had lost his primary weapon. In this critical situation, Abel unleashed his ultimate wind magic. "O wind, unleash destruction!" The gigantic whirlwind swept away everything, including the strongest warriors of the Doom tribe. Abel was stunned to realize Maya's father's extraordinary power. He could easily destroy Ashura, which was made from a demon tree, with his bare hands. "Is he using enhancement magic?" Abel wondered. Sheem explained that it was a secret technique of the Doom tribe's ancestors. Abel recalled his master also mentioning a similar technique called wooden pole. It was a body enhancement technique by channeling magic power into it, transforming the body into a living weapon. It required extremely refined control over magic power that only a few individuals in the ancient Marin tribe could achieve. Abel had tried to learn it but failed miserably, suffering muscle pain for a week. Therefore, he knew well the formidable nature of those who mastered this skill. Mia Atyevin's father explained that the crystal on the foreheads of Doom tribe members helped them perceive and control souls, thereby utilizing power magic. But Mia didn't have one. However, the truth was revealed. Mia was imprisoned not because she was useless, but because she possessed a special talent for sensing souls in the air, even without a crystal. The family feared or wanted to control that power. Abel realized that his magic and the totems emitted a special aura, allowing the enemy to pinpoint their location. He felt guilty towards Mia. The situation was a stalemate. If they used magic, they would be discovered. If they didn't, they couldn't fight back. Ashura was damaged, and Abel no longer had his strongest weapon. What should we do? He despaired. Surprisingly, Abel raised his hands in surrender to Sheem, or a female comrade, admitting he couldn't win in the current situation. Could this be a diversionary tactic? Despite her fear, Mia bravely stood up to face her father. "I'd rather perish right here than go back," she screamed, refusing a life of confinement. Abel also shouted to protect Mia, asserting that she deserved to be free and explore the world. Sheem and Abel condemned the father's cruel actions. They declared their resistance was to protect a meaningful life for Mia. A new plan was formed. Abel observed an exploding energy entity and smiled. Good. He intended to use the opponent's own power against them. Abel and Sheem discussed strategy. By merely distracting the opponent for a moment, they would use his keen perception to counterattack. Abel decided to use his magic to teleport the World Tree Totem, though not specialized in combat, into the battle, combining it with Sheem's power. The plan began. Abel exploited the chaos to deceive the opponent's senses, causing him to mistake the totem's aura for Abel's. A spectacular deception is being deployed to turn the tide. Back in the life-or-death battle, Abel had no other choice. He was forced to use his trump card. "O spirits, creators of Earth, right here and now, forge!" Abel shouted. A gigantic magic circle appeared behind him, emitting a blinding light. Maya's father, Merizef, was suddenly pushed back by an invisible force, his face showing clear astonishment. Abel's magic created a powerful energy vortex, engulfing Merizef. The mighty chieftain struggled in vain. He gritted his teeth, realizing he was being controlled by an undeniable power. Magi Metal Hidim Transformation Technique. "I call it Abel's whip," Abel declared confidently. The magical Hidim metal transformed into a long whip, tightly wrapped around Merizef, pinning him to the ground. But Merizef was not so easily defeated. With extraordinary physical strength, he strained to break free from the encirclement and charged to attack Abel. The two collided fiercely, Abel having to use all his might to defend. "Roar!" Abel roared, pouring all his strength to repel the opponent's attack. Fragments and energy scattered everywhere. After temporarily bringing the situation under control, or at least creating some distance, Abel panted and asked, "Chief of the Doom Tribe, Merizef, can you tell me?" Abel looked directly into Merizef's eyes, who was currently bound to a stone pillar, or restrained, and asked the most important question. "Why are you pursuing Maya so relentlessly?" Abel pointed out that if the objective was the ornaments Mia took, they had already transformed into the World Tree in Romaine. Merizef frowned, showing annoyance at hearing that. "You've been tracking this person's trail and Ashura's magical power, haven't you?" Abel continued to interrogate, recalling that Merizef had previously destroyed the Ashura golem. Merizef replied disdainfully, "I have nothing to say to you." Unwilling to cooperate, Merizef launched an attack again. He roared, using astonishing strength to break Abel's hold. Sheem watched with a horrified expression. "You still have the strength to resist?" In the chaos, Abel was caught between the clash of the two warriors. A voice commanded, "Take him down! Seize him!" The attack struck Sheem, or the long-haired comrade. Despite being hit directly, she gritted her teeth and endured it without much harm, making Abel exclaim in astonishment, "What are your bones made of?" Abel turned to question Merizef. "Is this power you gained by exploiting your own daughter?" Merizef remained silent, but his gaze seemed to be observing Abel's sophisticated metal manipulation technique. Merizef suddenly spoke. "Last night I saw a symbol hovering in the sky. It was indeed Mia's power, as the prophecy foretold." "I don't know what your purpose is," Merizef told Abel, "but perhaps you approached my daughter because you realized you could exploit her power." He accused Abel of merely using Maya. Abel was stunned. "My magic? Control Mia?" Sheem and the others were also utterly bewildered. "What is this, father?" Maya spoke, in imagination or reality. Merizef began to recount a story from 4,000 years ago, an ancient secret of this world. According to legend, the guardian deity of this land, Kudur, fought the evil sky god, Silfame, and sealed him away on the moon. Afterward, Kudur also fell into a deep slumber to recover. "We, the Doom clan, are descendants of the race created by the sky god," Merizef revealed. This information deeply shocked Abel and Sheem. The Doom Clan were not ordinary humans, but creations of a malevolent deity. The Sky God's purpose in creating the Doom Clan was to build an army against God Kudur, but before being sealed, the Sky God managed to sow the seeds of disaster. He implanted the living tome into the bodies of the Doom Clan's ancestors, a living biological weapon. The living tome? Abel muttered, beginning to piece everything together. Marazef pointed at Maya. Mia, that is you! Maya was aghast. She was not worthless, but a vessel for a world-ending weapon. The Doom Clan had been forgiven by God Kudur and allowed to live in this land in exchange for their oath of loyalty to him. But the Sky God was accumulating power on the moon to resurrect. The prophecy stated, 2,000 years later, the descendant of Calamity will become a powerful weapon for the celestial being. Abel was surprised. How do you know about the evil deity's resurrection? Even our Marin clan is only vaguely aware. Marazef replied that even recluses must know about the Moon Festival. The Moon Festival, Din May, occurs once every 500 years, when the moon is closest to Earth, enhancing the magical power of all living creatures. The next one will take place in 6 months. Marazef pointed out that recently, magical beasts everywhere have become unusually aggressive. That is a sign of global magical fluctuations. Sheem recalled the magical beast disaster in Romone, the appearance of the demon tree, and the great demon Zolomonia. All occurred rapidly in a short period, unprecedented in the past 100 years of history. Marazef affirmed, the Doom Clan no longer has any reason to be loyal to the Sky God. They have lived peacefully for 2,000 years. Therefore, he cannot allow the cursed child, Mia, to fall into the Sky God's hand and bring disaster upon the world. I underestimated the clan's defenses, Marazef confessed. He had intended to hide Maya away at least until after the Moon Festival 15 years later, which is now. Maya burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. If I had known that, I wouldn't have hated my family, I wouldn't have run away. She realized her father's long-standing coldness was actually to protect her, or protect the world from her. Marazef continued. 15 years ago, upon realizing his child was the cursed child, as clan head, he was compelled to eliminate this threat. He had intended to eliminate Maya right after she was born, but looking at the helpless infant in his arms, he couldn't do it. Paternal love triumphed over duty. The reason I let you live was because of my own selfishness. Maya collapsed. She realized she was not just a burden, but a ticking time bomb, a weapon for the evil deity to destroy the world. Rewind to the previous night. In a mountain range near Farge territory, Giselle looked up at the sky and saw a strange symbol. This is truly a good omen, she whispered. Giselle felt her brother's magical power was very close. She exclaimed joyfully, just as Shimson said, Big Brother is in that direction. Meanwhile, a mysterious individual, possibly the one behind Giselle's magic book, was chuckling to himself. He wanted to seize both Abel and that girl, Maya or Giselle. Giselle continued her journey with the fierce conviction that her brother also wanted to return home. The image of Giselle standing on a rock outcrop, looking into the distance, concludes this chapter. The Brokon, and somewhat dangerous younger sister, is drawing very near, promising a tumultuous reunion in Farge.